She didn't come down the road the way most people did. There was no wagon, no steady pace, no
They are
sense of
already here,
direction that
Daniel.
suggested she belonged anywhere near the land she was crossing. By the time Daniel saw her, she was already too close to turn away, stumbling more than walking, one hand pressed against her side like she had been holding herself together for miles. The wind carried dust across the open stretch of land, but it wasn't the dust that made her look worn. It was something deeper. Something that didn't come from travel, but from running. She didn't look up immediately when she reached the edge of the ranch. Just stopped, like she wasn't sure if she had made it far enough yet. Then finally, her voice came, quiet but urgent, like it had been waiting too long to be said. "I can work." Daniel didn't answer right away. He had seen people come through before, drifters, wanderers, those looking for something they couldn't name. But this was different. He wasn't looking at her clothes. Not at the dirt, not at the exhaustion. He was watching her eyes. And her eyes weren't searching for opportunity. They were searching for escape. She swayed slightly where she stood, catching herself before she could fall, and that was when he noticed the way she held her side more tightly, like whatever had driven her here hadn't left her untouched. "You're hurt," he said, stepping forward just enough to close the distance, but not enough to startle her. She shook her head quickly. Too quickly. "It's nothing." The words came fast, practiced, like she had said them before. Like she needed him to believe them. But her hand didn't move. And neither did his gaze. A moment passed, long enough for the silence to settle into something heavier. Then she added, softer now, "I just need a place to stay. Not a job. Not help. Not even safety. Just a place." The way she said it made it sound temporary, like she didn't expect it to last. Like she didn't want it to. Daniel studied her a moment longer before asking the question that mattered. "Where are you coming from?" It wasn't harsh. It wasn't accusing. Just simple. But her reaction wasn't. Her shoulders tightened, her eyes shifting past him, scanning the horizon behind her before settling back again. "It doesn't matter." A pause followed, but this one wasn't empty. It was filled with something unspoken, something she wasn't willing to give shape to. "And where are you headed?" he asked. That was when something changed. Not in her expression. In her silence. Because she didn't answer. Couldn't. And that told him more than anything she could have said. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint, distant sound of hooves. Not close. Not immediate. But enough. Enough for her to hear it. Enough for everything in her to react before her mind had time to catch up. Her head snapped toward the sound, her body stiffening, breath catching in a way that wasn't just fear. It was recognition. Instinct. The kind that didn't come from guessing, but from knowing exactly what followed. "Please," she said, her voice barely holding together now, not loud, but urgent in a way that didn't ask, it warned. "I can work. I won't cause trouble. She hesitated, and for the first time, something broke through the control she had been holding onto since she arrived. "I just can't be seen." That was the moment Daniel understood. Not everything. Not the story. But enough. This wasn't someone looking for work. This was someone trying not to be found. And people who ran like that didn't do it without reason. He looked past her, out toward the empty stretch she had come from. Nothing yet. Just distance. But the way she stood, the way she listened, whatever she feared wasn't far behind. He could have sent her away. It would have been easier. Cleaner. Safer. For him. For the ranch. For everything that didn't need complication. But something in the way she held herself, not weak, not helpless, but controlled despite everything pressing against her, made that choice feel wrong. "All right," he said finally, the word landing steady, without hesitation once it was made. "You can stay." She didn't react immediately. Didn't move. Like she needed to be sure she had heard him right. Then slowly, carefully, she nodded. Not relief. Not gratitude. Just acceptance. Like this was one more step in something she wasn't sure would hold. But, he added, just enough to ground the moment, you'll have to work. That earned the smallest shift in her expression. Not a smile. Something quieter. I will. And he believed her. She didn't go toward the house right away. Didn't step forward until he turned first, like she needed permission not just in words, but in movement. And even then, she kept her distance, her eyes moving constantly, never settling too long on one place. Watching. Measuring. Listening. As if safety wasn't something she could trust, only something she could manage. By the time the sun began to lower, she had said little else. No name. No past. No questions. And Daniel didn't push. Not yet. Because whatever she was carrying wasn't something that came out when asked. That night, the ranch settled into its usual quiet. The kind of quiet that made most people rest easier. But not her. She moved through the small room slowly, deliberately, like every shadow meant something. The window came first. She checked it once. Then again. Her fingers lingering at the edge like she wasn't sure it would hold. Then the door. Locked. Tested. Tested again. Every movement careful. Every breath measured. She didn't sit right away. Didn't lie down. Just stood there for a moment, listening to something no one else could hear. Outside, the night stretched wide and empty. But to her, it wasn't empty at all. And long after the ranch had gone still, she was still watching the window. The next morning didn't begin with noise. It began with silence, the kind that settles slowly, like the land itself is holding its breath. By the time the first light stretched across the ranch, Rose was already awake. Not because she had rested, but because she never truly had. Sleep, for her, was something shallow, something temporary, something that could be broken at any moment. So she moved before anyone else did, stepping outside with quiet precision, her presence barely noticeable against the stillness of the morning. She worked without being told. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. No hesitation, no wandering, no uncertainty. She found what needed to be done and did it. Water drawn before the sun rose too high, fire prepared before the kitchen asked for it, tools placed where they belonged before anyone realized they were missing. Her movements were efficient, deliberate, but never relaxed. Even in the smallest tasks, there was awareness. Constant, controlled, like she wasn't just working, she was listening. And always watching. When one of the ranch hands approached from behind, calling out something simple, something harmless, she flinched. Not enough for most to notice, but Daniel did. It wasn't fear of the man. It was something deeper, something trained. The instinct of someone who couldn't afford to be surprised. She recovered quickly, lowering her gaze, adjusting her hat just enough to shadow her face. Didn't mean to startle you, the man said with an easy tone. She nodded, but didn't answer. And when he lingered, expecting conversation, she turned back to her work as if the moment had already passed. That became the pattern. Voices came, she avoided them. Questions followed, she deflected them. Attention lingered, she stepped away from it. She kept her head down, her hat low, her presence small. Not invisible, but close enough that people began to notice in a different way. Because someone trying that hard not to be seen always ends up being seen. By midday, the quiet had started to shift, not at the ranch, but in town. Because absence has a way of becoming its own kind of presence. Someone asked about the new girl. Someone else said they hadn't seen her. Another pointed out she hadn't stepped foot past the ranch boundary. And just like that, curiosity began to take shape. What is he hiding out there? The question didn't come loudly, it didn't need to. It moved the way things do in small towns, through suggestion, through tone, through the spaces between words. And once it started, it didn't stop. Back at the ranch, Rose stayed far from the road, and that was no accident. Every time a distant sound carried across the land, wagon wheels, voices, hooves, her body reacted before her mind did. A stillness. A pause. A listening that went deeper than the surface. And once, when the sound lingered just a moment longer than it should have, she stepped back entirely, not slowly, not casually, but like someone pulling away from the edge of something dangerous. Daniel watched all of it. He didn't interrupt her work, didn't question her in front of others, but observation has its own weight, and eventually it asked to be answered. It happened late in the afternoon, when the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the yard. He found her near the fence line, fixing something that didn't quite need fixing. Busy hands, quiet mind, or at least that's how it looked. "You don't go into town," he said. She didn't look up. "There's no reason to." "There's always a reason." That made her pause, just for a second, long enough to acknowledge the truth in it, but not long enough to accept it. "I'd rather stay here," she replied. He stepped a little closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to be heard without raising his voice. "That's not the same thing." This time, she looked up slightly, not fully, not directly, but enough. The silence stretched between them, holding something unspoken. Then he said it. "You're not just hiding." A small pause followed. "You're running." The words landed quietly, without accusation, without pressure, just truth. And for a moment, it looked like she might deny it, like she might give him the same practiced answers she had used before. But she didn't. She said nothing. And in that silence, she confirmed everything. Something shifted between them then, not trust, not yet, but understanding. The kind that doesn't need explanation, only recognition. He didn't push further, didn't ask where she came from or who she feared, because whatever it was close enough that she could still feel it. And maybe, now, so could he. The evening came slower after that, heavier, like the day had left something behind it hadn't intended to. And as the last light faded, the land settled once more into quiet, but not the same quiet as before. This one carried something with it. Something approaching. The rider didn't arrive at the ranch, not yet. But in town, he had already begun asking questions, careful ones, measured ones, about a woman who didn't want to be seen. And this time, someone was starting to notice her description matched too well. By the third day, the ranch no longer adjusted to Rose's presence. It began to move with her. Not because she asked for it, not because she tried to change anything, but because she quietly became part of the rhythm. The kitchen shifted first. Meals came earlier, steadier, better thought through. Supplies stretched longer than they should have. Small inefficiencies disappeared without anyone noticing when they had been fixed. She didn't speak about it. Didn't draw attention. She simply worked, and the work spoke in ways she never would. But even as she settled into the routine, she never settled into the place. There was always something held back, something watching beneath the surface. Daniel noticed that more than anything else. It wasn't in what she did. It was in what she didn't allow herself to do. She never leaned fully into a moment. Never turned her back completely to a room. Always positioned herself with quiet awareness, near exits, near open space, near control. It wasn't habit. It was preparation. The boy saw something different. He didn't see fear, not the way adults did. What he saw was attention. Care. The kind that didn't rush him away or dismiss him. He started coming by more often, finding reasons that didn't need to make sense, just to be near her. Rose didn't encourage him, but she didn't turn him away either. She allowed him to stay, and in that quiet permission, something began to grow. One afternoon, he found her sitting just outside the house, a piece of cloth in her hands, stitching slowly, carefully, like each thread mattered. He sat beside her without asking, watching her work before speaking. "You sew like my ma used to," he said. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper. Her hand slowed slightly. Just enough to show the impact. "She taught me," she said. Not the full truth. Not a lie. Just something that could pass. "Can you teach me?" he asked. She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she hadn't expected to be asked. Then, after a moment, she nodded. And for the briefest time, something in her softened. Something real. Something unguarded. But softness didn't last. A sound came from the road. Faint. Distant. Ordinary to anyone else. But not to her. Her head turned instantly, her body following a second later, her entire focus shifting in one sharp motion. The boy turned too, confused more than concerned. "It's just someone passing," he said. But she wasn't listening. Her eyes were already scanning, already measuring distance, already calculating something no one else could see. The boy looked up at her, studying her now with quiet curiosity. "You act like you're in danger all the time." The words weren't meant to expose anything. But they did. Because she didn't answer. And in that silence, something became clear. Daniel had been watching from a distance. Not close enough to interrupt. Close enough to understand. He saw the shift, the way her guard returned instantly, like it had never truly been gone. And it confirmed what he had already begun to suspect. Whatever she was running from wasn't just behind her. It was still close enough to feel. Later that evening, as the ranch settled into its usual quiet, Daniel came across something he wasn't meant to find. It wasn't hidden well, not because she was careless, but because she hadn't expected anyone to look. A small piece of paper, folded tightly, tucked into the lining of her bag. It might have meant nothing to someone else. But to him, it stood out. He hesitated before opening it. Not because he doubted what it might be, but because he understood what it would mean once he saw it. Still, he unfolded it slowly. And then everything shifted. The paper was torn, incomplete, like it had been taken from something larger. But what remained was enough. A name. Not the one she had given. And beneath it, a mark. Official. Recognizable. Not something that belonged to a drifter or someone without a past. It belonged to power. To structure. To something that didn't let people disappear easily. He stared at it for a long moment, letting the truth settle in. She wasn't just hiding. She was being searched for. And whatever had been sent to find her wouldn't stop. He folded the paper back carefully, exactly as it had been, and returned it to its place. He didn't confront her. Didn't ask questions. Because this wasn't something she would explain if asked. And more than that, he wasn't sure he wanted her to. Not yet. Because now the question wasn't just who she was. It was what would happen when whoever was looking for her finally arrived. Outside, the land remained still, quiet in a way that felt too deliberate. And somewhere beyond it, unseen but moving closer, someone had already picked up her trail. Daniel knew it now without needing to hear it spoken. Someone wasn't just looking for her. They were closing in. The town didn't change all at once. It never did. Change there moved quietly, through glances, through pauses in conversation, through the way people stopped speaking when someone else stepped closer. By the time the riders arrived, the ground had already been prepared for them. Curiosity had turned into suspicion, and suspicion had been waiting for confirmation. They came just after midday, when the sun sat high enough to leave no shadows to hide in. 3 men, maybe 4 depending on how you counted distance, their horses slowing as they entered the center of town, not in a rush, not in pursuit, but with the kind of certainty that said they didn't need to hurry. They knew what they were looking for, and they knew they were close. They didn't announce themselves, didn't raise their voices. The first question was asked casually, like it didn't matter, like it was just another passing inquiry. "You seen a woman come through here?" The man's tone was even, controlled, but his eyes weren't. His eyes moved carefully, measuring reactions, watching not just for answers but for hesitation. At first, the town gave them nothing. A shake of the head, a shrug, silence. But silence in a place like that wasn't empty. It was thinking. It was remembering. And slowly, pieces began to align. Depends what kind of woman, someone finally said. The writer didn't smile. One who doesn't want to be seen. That was enough, because now the question had shape, and once something has shape, people begin to recognize it. She's been staying out at Daniel's place, another voice added, quieter, but not quiet enough. The shift was immediate, not loud, not dramatic, but real, because now the writers had direction, and the town had something to decide. Back at the ranch, the air hadn't changed yet, not fully, but something underneath it had begun to move, the kind of tension that doesn't come from what's happening but from what's about to. Rose felt it before she understood it. She had been working inside when it started, something small, something routine, but her hands slowed without reason, her breathing shifting in a way that didn't come from thought but from instinct. Something had caught up. She stepped outside, her eyes scanning the horizon without appearing to. Everything looked the same, the land stretching wide and empty just as it had the day before, just as it had the day she arrived, but it didn't feel the same, and that was enough. The truth didn't reach her directly. It never does. It came through distance, through voices that didn't belong to her but carried just far enough to matter, a passing rider, a slowed conversation, words not meant for her but not hidden from her either. She's not who she says she is. The sentence drifted just enough to land. Then another. She's dangerous, or she wouldn't be running. That one stayed, not because it was louder but because it sounded familiar, too familiar. Something inside her went still, not shaken, not panicked, worse, certain, because she had heard that before, in other places, from other people, right before everything fell apart. She didn't argue, didn't step forward, didn't try to reshape what had already begun to spread, because she knew how this part ended. The moment people started deciding who you were, they stopped listening to who you said you were. Daniel heard it too, not the same way, not from the same place, but enough to understand what it meant. The writers hadn't come by chance, they had come with purpose, and now they had a name. By the time the sun began to fall, the pressure had shifted, not just from the writers but from the town, because fear doesn't stay neutral for long, it looks for direction, and in that moment, it found one. Turn her in. The words weren't shouted, they didn't need to be. They settled into the space between people, into the quiet understanding that protecting one person could risk everything else, and just like that, the ranch was no longer just a place, it was a problem. Rose didn't wait for it to reach her fully, she didn't need confirmation, didn't need confrontation, because she had already seen this unfold before, and she knew the only way to survive it was to leave before it closed in. That night she moved quietly, more quietly than she had since she arrived, not because she was hiding but because she was finishing something. Her things were already few, that made it easier, a small bag, carefully packed, no wasted movement, no hesitation, just preparation. She paused once, only once, her hand resting against the edge of the table, her eyes moving briefly across the room as if measuring something she couldn't carry with her, then she let it go. No note, no explanation, no goodbye, because leaving quietly meant no one had the chance to stop her, and being stopped was something she couldn't risk. Outside, the night stretched wide and dark, the kind of darkness that hides movement, the kind she understood. By the time the first light began to touch the horizon, she was already gone, and this time Daniel didn't see her leave. They found her just outside the edge of town, where the land opened wide again and the road stretched forward like it didn't belong to anyone. She hadn't gone far, not because she couldn't, but because she knew distance wouldn't save her. It never had. The morning air was still, carrying the quiet weight of something already decided. When the sound of hooves reached her this time, she didn't turn and panic, didn't run, she just stopped walking. There's a moment when running ends where everything becomes still, not peaceful, not safe, just certain, and she knew that moment well. The riders approached without urgency, their pace steady and controlled, like men who didn't expect resistance. They spread slightly as they closed in, not aggressively, but enough to remove the illusion of escape. The leader stepped forward first, his gaze fixed on her with the kind of recognition that confirmed everything without needing to say it. "You're coming back," he said. There was no anger in his voice, no force, just inevitability. Rose didn't argue, didn't step back, didn't even look around for help because she wasn't expecting any. She had already accepted the ending long before it arrived. Her hands remained still at her sides, her expression quiet, not defeated, but resolved in a way that comes from understanding how little control you have left. Around them, the town had begun to gather, slowly at first, then all at once, people drawn not by curiosity anymore but by the weight of what was happening. They stood at a distance, watching, measuring, deciding where they stood without saying it out loud. No one stepped forward, no one spoke, because moments like this don't belong to crowds, they belong to choices. The man reached for her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to remind her what came next, and she let him, not because she agreed, but because she had already learned that resistance only delayed what couldn't be stopped. Then another sound came, different this time, not part of the group, not expected. It came from behind them, steady and unhurried, cutting through the stillness in a way that didn't demand attention but took it anyway. Daniel didn't arrive fast, didn't ride in like a man chasing something, he arrived like a man who had already decided what he was going to do. By the time he reached them, he didn't raise his voice, didn't call out, didn't announce himself, he simply stepped down and closed the distance on foot, his presence settling into the space between them without force but with weight, and then he stopped, right between her and them. The shift was immediate, not loud, not chaotic, but undeniable, because now the moment didn't belong to just one side anymore. The leader's eyes narrowed slightly, not in confusion, but in calculation. "You know who she is?" he asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word landed clean and certain, no defense, no denial, just truth. A pause followed, longer than expected, stretching just enough to pull every eye closer to what would come next. "And I know why she ran." That changed everything, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. He didn't explain her, didn't justify her, didn't ask permission for her to stay, he simply stood there, holding ground that hadn't been offered to him. The air tightened, tension settling into every space between movement and stillness. The town watched, waiting for something to break, a command, a threat, a decision that would tip everything forward. Because now the stakes had changed. This wasn't just about her anymore. Daniel stood there knowing exactly what he was risking, his wrench, his standing, the quiet respect that kept everything around him stable, and still he didn't move, didn't step back, didn't look at her, because this wasn't about saving her, it was about standing, and that was something no one could take from him. Behind him, Rose hadn't moved, but something inside her had, slowly, quietly. The realization didn't come all at once, it came in pieces, in the way he answered, in the way he didn't hesitate, in the way he didn't ask her to explain herself first. He knew, and he still came. That was the part she hadn't expected, not from him, not from anyone. The man's grip on her arm loosened slightly, not out of kindness, but uncertainty, because control relies on assumption, and the moment someone refuses to follow that assumption, everything shifts. The silence stretched again, longer this time, heavier, because now the outcome wasn't clear, and for the first time since this began, it wasn't decided. Rose's eyes moved, not to the riders, not to the town, but to the space just in front of her, to the line that had been drawn without being spoken, the one that separated leaving from staying, running from standing still. She had crossed that line before, every time it led to the same place, loss, but this time someone had stepped into it with her, and that changed what it meant. The world around her waited, the riders, the town, Daniel, all of them still, all of them watching, but none of them choosing for her, not this time, and that was the difference. Because now the choice was hers, whether to run again or finally stop. The world didn't move right away. After Daniel's words settled into the air, everything seemed to pause, like even the wind was waiting to see what would happen next. The riders didn't advance, the town didn't speak, and Rose stood there, caught in the space between what she had always done and what she had never allowed herself to do. For the first time since she had started running, nothing was chasing her. Nothing was forcing her forward. Everything was waiting. Daniel didn't turn around, didn't look back at her, he didn't need to. Whatever choice she made, it had to be hers, not influenced, not protected, not carried, just hers. And so he stood there, steady and unmoving, not as a shield, but as something far more unfamiliar to her, a place she could choose. Rose's breath came slowly at first, uneven, like she didn't trust the air around her. Her eyes moved across the space in front of her, not searching for escape this time, but searching for something else, something she had never stopped long enough to feel. It wasn't safety she found, it was something quieter, something harder, a chance. "I didn't want anyone to find me," she said, her voice low but steady enough to carry. The words didn't come easily, but they came honestly. A pause followed, filled with everything she had kept buried. "I thought hiding was the only way to survive." No one interrupted her, no one challenged her, because this wasn't something that could be argued, it could only be understood. Daniel's voice came after a moment, calm, certain, unchanged. "You don't have to hide here." He didn't say more, didn't promise anything, didn't try to convince her, just a simple truth placed in front of her like a door left open. And for the first time, she considered walking through it. Her shoulders eased slightly, like something inside her had finally loosened its grip. She drew in a deeper breath, not like someone preparing to run, but like someone preparing to stay, the kind of breath that doesn't come from fear, but from decision. "I've been running long enough," she said, quieter now, but stronger. There was a pause, long enough to carry everything behind it. Then she finished, "I'm done." The words didn't echo, they settled, and in that moment everything changed, not around her, but within her. The choice had been made, not because she was safe, not because the danger had disappeared, but because she had decided she would no longer let it define where she stood. The riders watched, uncertain now, the control they had carried into the moment no longer as solid as it had been. The town remained still, caught between what they expected and what they were witnessing. And Daniel didn't move, didn't react, because this wasn't his moment to claim, it was hers. Rose stepped forward, not away, not back, but forward, closing the distance she had once tried to keep, not hiding behind him, not standing apart, but beside him, equal, present, certain. And for the first time since she arrived, she didn't look over her shoulder, she didn't listen for footsteps, she didn't prepare to leave, she simply stood, because staying was no longer something she feared, it was something she chose.